What's up, guys? It's Friday, September 4th, 2020, and it's Fritz, and I think I'm live. I'm not entirely sure about that. I don't have chat bubbles up. I can see me playing on Twitter and possibly on my YouTube channel. I don't know. It's my first time hitting a go live button, and also it's recording in the background. So if I did screw up, hopefully I still have everything. But welcome to this, the first ever, if it's live edition of the Fritzcast. And I don't I don't even know where to begin, man. We're on right now, like I said, we're on Periscope, on Twitter. Should be on YouTube, D Live. Restreamio is pumping out to a couple different things, and so we're just gonna see how it goes. We're gonna go with the flow on this one. I'm a little off base going live. Usually used to just sitting here producing out an episode, recording it. So we'll see how it goes. Anyway, last week I didn't do an episode of the Fritzcast, and there was two reasons why I didn't do an episode. The first and foremost reason was because I finally, for like the first time over the course of this summer, and really in months, my wife and I, along with my wife's aunt, went down to Ocean City, Maryland, to a Jeep Week thing. And so we were at the beach, Ocean City, Maryland's a beach town, and it was nice to get away from the house, go somewhere, do something. It was a big Jeep Week convention thing. My wife's aunt has a Jeep Wrangler, and it's pretty cool. It's like a not a neon green, but it's a nice metallic green color. And it's a Jeep Wrangler JK. Big guy. I think it's a 2019 or a 2018. And I'm somewhat of a wanting of a Jeep Wrangler. The way I put it in my Twitter is I have severe Jeep envy, and it probably wasn't a good idea to go to a Jeep Week event of sorts to see all these Jeeps, all these customization things that you can do with them, the cool things that people come up with to mock up and personalize their Jeeps. And here I am not having one, can't get one right now, but here I am walking around and taking in a giant Jeep Week event thing. It was cool, but at the same time, it's not like it quelled your envy at all. It just, it increased it. It jacked it up by about 1 million. But it was nice to go to the beach, though, because obviously we brought my daughter along. My daughter, Emmy, turns 1 on the 12th. So that's some 8 days away, and that's insane. But it was the first time that we were able to take her to the beach, experience the ocean. Like, she's done swimming pools. She loves the water. She loves taking her baths and all that. The ocean was a little bit of a different vibe for her, though, because I held her up as these waves came crashing up, and she was just like, "Whoa, water flow! What the hell? I'm not into this, Dad. Take me back." But she was still fascinated by it. She was fascinated by the water. She loved sand, to the degree that she even tried to eat some of it, which, what can you do? Kids try to eat sand. It's crazy. But she loved the sand. She loved playing in the sand. So, we had a lot of fun with that. And I think it's important to stress that whole we had fun with it aspect thing, because ever since, March, April, when these lockdowns started rolling in, coronavirus took over the world. Everybody kind of holed up and was like, wow, this is what we have to do. This is life now. And, it doesn't seem like a big deal at the time. It seemed like, okay, not much is being asked of us. We're going to stay at home, and that'll be that. But after a while, you get a little stir crazy. You want to have somewhat of a return to normalcy. And it's hard to do that, especially if you're on Twitter all the time, if you're on the internet all the time, and you go by what the internet narrative, is that's going on. you really get caught up in this different world. I call Twitter and all forms of social media, Facebook for, you boomers out there that use Facebook and all that. I call it a bubble world. It exists in its own dynamic. And really, I think it's not a very good representation of what people actually think, despite what you may believe about me being on Twitter a lot. I don't believe that it's a very representative format, if you know what I mean. Pew Research did research on this thing, especially when it comes to politics and things of that nature. I think it was Pew Research did the numbers, and it's something like the top 10% or 80% of the top tweets come from like 10% of the accounts. It's like very, on the grand scale, minuscule of what's representative of the general, populace, what's actually generally accepted and believed. I'm going on a tangent. I'm sorry. Forgive me. But let me backtrack for a minute. So we got into these lockdowns of coronavirus and all that, and people got stir crazy, and then there was just this wanting of, a little bit of a return to normalcy. We get it all the time with the news and stuff. There's protests going on all over the world. Well, all over the world, but all over America. I'm trying to focus on local, nationwide stuff. So, in America, we have protests going on everywhere. A lot of it over criminal justice reform, and a lot of it we're going to talk about in a minute, especially some of the more heated subjects that have popped up over the past 2 weeks. But we have these protests going on, and for the most part, not criticized for large social gatherings, despite the fact that nearly every other large social gathering that would happen would be criticized. And, maybe it's people walking a fine line. I'm not entirely sure what it is or what to refer to it as, but, if you've watched any of the last couple episodes of Fritzcast, I've said it time and again. I'm at the point where I'm done hearing news media. I'm done reading articles. I'm done looking at this from an angle of, at first when the coronavirus broke out, I was all, if we have to wear a mask, we have to wear a mask. We have to limit the amount of people that are going somewhere. We'll limit the amount of people that are going somewhere. I played along with it. And then things happen. Things happen where we see a lot of yes for this, no for this, for me, not for thee, practices like Nancy Pelosi going to a hair salon that's closed in California, but Nancy Pelosi can go and do it. And then she wants to say that she was set up for it. Maybe we'll look at that. I don't know if we'll look at that. I'll hold off for right now. But, when the protests started upkicking, there was articles flowing out about how, there's no coronavirus spread with these protests because they're observing social distancing and they're wearing masks. If that's the case, then what is the problem with anybody going and doing anything as long as some social distancing and mask wearing is going on? But that's not the narratives that we get in the news. The narratives that we get in the news is if people gathered and protest the lockdowns, that's bad. But if they're gathering and protesting social justice in the name of criminal justice reform or something of that nature, that's fine. That's good. And to me, I don't think that you can pick and choose that way. I would be way more sympathetic to the measures of fighting coronavirus if it was one size fits all in that sense. But it's not. It's not. Protests go on. You can't criticize the protest. That's bad. That's somebody's First Amendment right. They're gathering. They're just expressing their First Amendment right. If you want to go to a beach, for example, you're just being selfish. You're being a selfish jerk who wants to go to the beach. There's a difference between going to the beach and going to a protest. Now, some of these protests went as far as what am I thinking? The mail-in ballots thing. Let's switch over the election to mail-in ballots so people don't have to gather at the polls There was a protest of people gathered to protest the fact that they would have to gather at the polls to go vote. Where does that make sense? Doesn't make sense to me, at least. But where does it make sense? And especially, I'm sure this varies region to region and polling place to polling place. But in the 3-4 elections that I've been privy to vote in, that I've been that I've engaged in, every time I go to my polling place, and it's switched 3 times in the last 3 elections, oddly enough. Every time I go into my polling place, there are more polling workers than there are people in line to vote. Usually there's nobody in line to vote, or very, very few. And I walk in the polling place, I'm not even there for a total of 5 minutes to check in, go to the voting booth, hit the buttons, and leave. And get my I voted sticker, because you obviously want to get an I voted sticker. To me, if protests are okay, and we're not going to criticize them, and by the way, I don't think we should. Peaceful protests are a constitutional guaranteed right. Period. The end. Never going to argue against that right. But if we're doing that, I don't see what the problem is having the polls open. Now, nothing of what I've read suggests that physical polling places will not be open. But this is where it gets, into confusing territory and very harsh rhetoric and everything online in the discussions. It's like the facts don't even matter. We're just going to keep going on tirades about why voting in person would be bad versus why voting in the mail would be bad. And it becomes this huge jumbled mess. And it's hard to break it down and pick it apart, if you know what I mean. So I did mention that last week I didn't do an episode, and I said it was for 2 reasons. Half the reason was I finally decided to take time, go somewhere, and enjoy myself, with my family, on a vacation. Because for this guy, work hasn't stopped. Work actually has increased and become more stressful than it normally would be under the conditions of a coronavirus and trying to, minimize an impact, minimize a spread or an outbreak. That's just added on to normal work stress. Mind you, going on vacation, that was my first time really fully experiencing how people are conducting themselves in a more touristy area, a more vacation-y area than just run-of-the-mill, going to the grocery store, going to a store around town. I don't know how other places in the nation are faring right now and their lockdown rules and all that. I know, but where I'm at, we're not fully open like everything's normal, but almost virtually every store that you can think of is open. The malls are open. People can go anywhere. You can dine in a restaurant, both inside, and a lot of them have set up outside seating and all that. So where I'm at, the only real difference is maybe there's some capacities to buildings for how many people can go in, like a certain percentage of fire capacity, and wearing masks. But other than that, it's not all that different. But in my general grind of just doing that normal stuff, I haven't run into anybody that's been difficult over this, social distancing and mask wearing. And now I can say that I've gone to a beach. Much the same. This Jeep Week event was exclusively held outside, which I believe if you're outside, I don't see the point in wearing a mask. I don't wear a mask outside. I breathe fresh air, and if you're even close to within 6 feet of me, get out of my space, dude. This is my bubble. This is me and my family's bubble. Go away. So, I didn't run into any snags or problems there. I think people generally are respectful of it to the degree that we have to be. But I digress on that. So it was interesting to experience that side of things. The other reason why I completely skipped an episode. I could have squeezed an episode in over the weekend, but a lot of things were going on. And, I think everybody, maybe this is Twitter syndrome, I think everybody just wants to rush to throw in their 2 cents or get in on the conversation to our detriment. I think more people, over this past 2-week span, I've seen more people say or put out tweets or posts on Facebook that, it's okay to not know what you actually think about an issue or an incident or something that happened because, there's blurred lines. There's things that we just don't know. And it's hard to sift through some of the rhetoric, man, is so divisive. To the extent that a lot of times when I read somebody's take on Twitter, I'm reading it and I'm thinking, does this person actually think this way? Are they just trolling? Is this a bot? What is this? Because I don't think a normal person thinks this way. And then at the same token, something hits me in the head and says, a lot of normal people ain't on Twitter. That might be true. I don't know. But the rhetoric gets so drummed up. It gets so vitriolic. Like, there's times where I'm thinking this nation's at a breaking point. It's tearing at the seams. There's probably nothing that can sew the fabric back together. Sometimes it feels like there's just this inevitable thing that's going to happen. And at times it seems like people want that thing to happen. But I don't want to say it's like people LARPing, I'd like, just live action role play all about trying to live out some big historic event so that they can have their big sense of purpose in life, so that they can have their big achievement, that they can say, I fought in the great Portland Wars of, Antifa and all that. I don't know. But it gets so crazy. And a lot of times I can't make heads or tails of things. And I wonder if people are like clamoring for this big, like, you want to build it up and make it cinematic, almost like a movie. Like it's good versus evil, and there's a staunch good side here, there's a staunch evil side over here. There's heroes, people are making their own heroes right now over this, and some of it I can't stomach. Some of it I really can't stomach. And when I say people rush to do the takes, I think I gave a pretty bad take with Kenosha, with the officer-involved shooting there. I'd have to look for my tweet on it because it was it wasn't a huge thread, but I had written something about just totally. It was right after it happened. And I went on like maybe a 5 or 6 tweet tirade. I know that's pretty light for a Twitter thread, actually, considering I've seen some people dive really, really deep into it. But, at a certain point, I believe you don't do that on Twitter. You don't do a 94 thread tweet on Twitter. That's a blog post. Do it on your blog, not on Twitter. But I did a thread like almost immediately after it happened, when the news broke, and I just like I laid into the cop that did it, the whole situation, and then slowly other details come into play. Now, still, even with some of the other details into play, I'm with a lot of libertarian people, thinkers. Excuse me, my throat is acting up. I'm on par with a lot of libertarian thinkers and philosophers and public figures in that I don't want law enforcement. I don't want police being judge, jury, and executioner of our legal system. in the sense of, what happened, watching videos, I mean, the first video comes out. This cop shoots this guy in the back like 7 times, which I think to anybody seems like, whoa, that's way excessive. This guy was hell-bent on just shooting this dude. And then other videos come out of how Jacob Blakey struggled with the cops beforehand, before that incident of him walking to his car. Allegedly, they're saying that he had a knife either on his person or in his car. Could be not. And then there's the other information that comes out, like, did the police just randomly show up and hear this incident happen, or were the police called because this man had been charged with third-degree sexual assault and actually went back to the woman's house? Changes the narrative up, each time another detail changes the narrative up. At the end of the day, we can still get to a conclusion that, shooting a guy 7 times in the back is a bit excessive and uncalled for and unjustified. But, I did my whole take on that, and then I felt like after all this information comes out, like, why do I do this instant take thing? Why do I try to do this hot take thing? Why do I spout out my opinion on something immediately as it happens? Especially because I oftentimes criticize that on the Twitterverse, on the internet, and even just in general discussion. I tend not to be that kind of person, but it happens. Emotions get the best of us. And that's no less true in the case of Kenosha. What happens after this? People go to protest. Protesting has happened for a very, very long time over these past couple of months. Not over just the criminal justice reform angle, but I've been one that says that the COVID lockdowns have fueled tensions and fires in people. People have lost their jobs. People are at their wits' end. So what else is there left to do? But there's a difference between excuse me. There's a difference between lots of motorcycles driving by my house. There's a difference between protesting, which protests have been going on rather peacefully, and then rioting and looting. And typically what happens is protests happen during daylight. People are out and about during the day. They gather, they protest. It's mostly peaceful. Almost like 99% peaceful. There might be a couple, knuckleheads in the mix there or whatever. And then the lights go down, and then things get a little more violent. Things get a little more antsy. People who have nefarious intent in their mind come out to play. And we get rioting and looting and damages to business and burning down businesses and, burning down and vandalizing government buildings and all that. Which, it's very hard for me to defend anybody that would vandalize and destroy property of another person. Sure, somebody's business isn't necessarily their house, but you don't know what they put into that business, And then people want to try to brush it off by saying, "Oh, they have insurance." Well, insurance costs money that came out of their business earnings on top of the taxes that they had to pay, on top of, maybe they're paying rent or leasing that building. And then there's also the aspect of the insurance doesn't just 100% cover everything and make it magically okay, because then insurance rates go up. And now people are saddled with even higher insurance payments, not to mention the fact that they're trying to rebuild something that was destroyed. And what was it destroyed for? What did it accomplish? Nothing. Didn't accomplish anything except letting out anger and angst. And you'll never hear me say, that's okay, that's cool, because they're driving for a change. I don't think rioters and looters are driving for any change. I just think they're people that like to break shit and are taking advantage of something. And I actually think a lot of people think that way about those things. Maybe I'm wrong. But I'll never condemn peaceful protesters, and I'll never lump peaceful protesters in with rioters and looters. And I'll never say that they are synonymous and that they work hand in hand with each other. I don't think they do. I really don't think they do. But in Kenosha, things got so heated that we have Kyle Rittenhouse, a 17-year-old kid who I believe was shot at least 3 people, killing 2 of them, if I'm correct. I might not have those details on lock. I probably should for how long that story's been out. But, I don't know what to tell you. I will tell you that I have seen people pick apart this story on both sides of the aisle, not objectively, but purely emotionally, not using facts, not using objective reality or objective truth in this. Surprisingly, one of the best threads that I can pull up, and I'm going to pull it up on screen, is from the visual investigation teams of the New York Times. And I'm shocked to say that it was the New York Times to do it, because I fully expected them to not be on the side of the spectrum that would present this objectively. Because a lot of people have, when we read into this Kyle Rittenhouse thing, there's a whole wave of people that are saying he's a white supremacist, that he went down there with willful intent to just murder people, just go ham. And it's not really the truth. It's not really the narrative. He didn't just go down there at night. He was there during the day. He was there during the day because allegedly he worked there and he was helping clean up vandalism and graffiti and other things. And he was also being a medic on top of, other things. A lot of people were talking about how he carried this gun across state lines. His legal team is arguing that he didn't actually carry this gun across state lines. I just want to go to the thread, though, because the thread was rather objective. I'll read from this. This is from Christian Trebert, and there's some videos that I might play in here as well to go along with it. So let's just get to it. A teenager faces charges in shootings that left 2 people dead in Kenosha. The New York Times visual investigations team reviewed hours of live stream to track 17-year-old Kyle Rittenhouse's movements during and leading up to the shootings. In the hours before the shooting incident, these accounts, I'll gloss over them. You can check them out on your own. All interviewed Rittenhouse, who said he was protecting a local vehicle dealership together with several other armed men. He also offered medical assistance to protesters. So that right there should be painting a narrative that Kyle Rittenhouse didn't have this malintent of, I'm just going to target protesters and go ham, which I've heard people say. But he was actually offering medical assistance, I guess to the degree that he could, to protesters. Rittenhouse is around that area in most of the footage we reviewed. About 15 minutes before the first shooting, police drive past Rittenhouse and thank the group that he's with. Quote, "We appreciate you guys, we really do." And seen handing out water bottles. This is another rhetoric piece that goes out. Oh, the police are just handing out water bottles to the militia and walking past them. There's a lot of rhetoric we can get into with that, including whether people have the right to be armed at protest or not. In many areas, they do have the right to be armed and protesting, and just having a gun doesn't necessarily make somebody a threat. I get where people are going with it, though, but that being said, we'll continue in the thread. Rittenhouse walks up to a police vehicle with his rifle slung and talks with the officers. One tosses a water bottle to the armed men. Rittenhouse eventually leaves the dealership and is barred by police from returning to there 6 minutes before the shooting. To better understand what happens next, we synchronized 6 live streams which revealed there were 2 separate shooting incidents about 1.5 minutes apart involving multiple gunmen. At 23:19, Rittenhouse is seen in this YouTube live stream. He's being chased into a parking lot. While he's being pursued, an unknown gunman fires the first shot into the air. We'll see if I can bring up audio. There's a handgun that goes off as Kyle's running away. We have multiple shots there.
Them is white boys.
Play that again. So that's Rittenhouse running away.
That's Antifa, man.
And then somebody
got a gun, baby.
over here fires.
Ooh, they shooting.
Rittenhouse turns towards the sound of the gunfire as another pursuer lunges towards him. He then fires 4 times with an assault rifle and appears to shoot the man in the head. That's this footage here. I'm going to play that from the beginning. Handgun muzzle flash over off to the left. Somebody charging Kyle. 4 shots shot by him. It's unclear why Rittenhouse was being chased or why he was in the area of the car dealership about 4 blocks away from the one he claimed to be protecting. We do know vehicles in this lot were damaged minutes before the first shooting. There's not anything here other than watching people vandalize vehicles. The initial shot Rittenhouse's 4 subsequent discharges of his AR-15 style weapon are followed by 3 more shots in the parking lot. We don't know who fired them. Rittenhouse seems to make a phone call and then flees the scene. This phone call that he made allegedly was to a friend to say that he had shot somebody, which might not have been smart on his part. There's Rittenhouse. While fleeing the scene, Rittenhouse is again chased by several people. He trips, falls to the ground, and fires 4 shots as 3 people rush him. One person appears to be hit in the chest, while another, who's carrying a handgun, is hit in the arm. So that's Rittenhouse running away. People are chasing him. He stumbles, somebody runs up onto him, he fires. Somebody comes up with a skateboard. He gets shot in the stomach, shot in the arm. He has a handgun. This gentleman right here. At the same time, we hear 8 gunshots from farther away. Mr. Rittenhouse gets up and begins walking north from the scene, and 8 more gunshots are heard from closer range. It's unclear who fired the other gunshots. Police vehicles just 1 block away remain stationary during the gunfire. Rittenhouse walks with his hands up towards the police vehicles as bystanders call out that he was involved in the shooting. Police drive by him to the scene of the shootings without stopping. Rittenhouse's social media profiles proclaim support for pro-police causes like Blue Lives Matter movement and Humanize the Badge. Other posts show him taking backyard target practice with posting with guns and assembling in a military-style semi-automatic rifle. They continue to investigate this incident. This is one of the best threads on this issue that's out there from the New York Times. And like I said, I can't believe the New York Times has one of the best put together objective threads to look at it. That being said, there's lots of people talking about Rittenhouse. Some people have labeled him a murderer, a mass shooter, a white supremacist, without taking into consideration the fact that gunfire was going all over the place by accounts. New York Times accounts even, and even in the live stream accounts. Gunshots were going off everywhere. This is what happens when some place becomes a war zone, and that's what I referred to Kenosha. After this night, I said it's a bloody war zone. People are running around, shots are being fired left and right, and people aren't going to be objective about this kind of a thing. It's hard to sit down and break something down like this and remove all facets of emotion from it. Really is. Excuse me. But Kyle Rittenhouse has a case for self-defense here. Before I dive into my next portion of my take on this, I just want to play this quick law video that'll lay it down good for you.
Look at the second-degree intentional homicide statute. So if one of those affirmative defenses apply and they're able to drop it from that first degree into a second degree, then we're going to jump into this different statute, which is what is in the Wisconsin law. Whoever causes the death of another human being with the intent to kill that person or another is guilty of a Class B felony if the state fails to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the mitigating circumstances did not exist as required by 940, which is the previous subsection. So here's this is a lot of work, but here's how it works. Kyle goes into court and he says, yes, I did shoot that person, all those people. I did intend to shoot all of those people. But this is not intentional murder. This is not murder. This is something where I believed that I was under, an imminent circumstances where my death was going to occur or substantial bodily harm was going to occur to me. Therefore, I am sort of exempt from that first degree intentional murder statute. The government has to come back and say, well, what were those circumstances? So Kyle is saying, here are my circumstances. It's an affirmative defense because I was being chased. They were threatening to kill me. They were, surrounding me from every which way, every angle. They all had, many of them had firearms. They were making verbal threats to me, all of those things. Then he can use that and say, that's my defense. Yes, I killed him, but that's my defense, which is pretty reasonable. So then the government now has to come back and say, yes, but none of those factors existed. They actually weren't chasing you. They actually weren't threatening you. Or if they were, none of that amounted to what would otherwise be considered an imminent, reasonable threat of death or imminent injury to your body. So that's going to be a pretty big question, and we're going to see whether or not that comes up. There is another.
So that is a potential for his defense, especially against the willful intent and murder charges. I was really surprised to see those level of charges brought down on him, given the video that I saw, and then reading through this New York Times thread. I really felt like they were setting themselves up for failure on that one. But there was another take or another view that I wanted to have of this, that I wanted to present you with, and I do. And libertarians had a big all-out discussion on this one, and libertarians, get ready because I'm coming for you next. This is a tragic situation. Like I said, this turned into a war zone. This is how people are now. There's a lot of unpersoning going on. There's a lot of this vitriolic behavior, this somebody that thinks differently from me politically is my enemy. They are not only just my enemy, but they're also inhuman, and they're not worthy of their life. That's the rhetoric that's at play here, and it's really bad. It is really bad for us to get into this level of, let's dehumanize the other side. The other side's not only my enemy, but they are unworthy of life. They're too far gone to be converted. We can't talk to them. We can't associate with them in any way, shape, or form. And so, therefore, pardon my French, fuck them. That's where we're at. And we have a side here that's tearing down the 17-year-old with baseless rhetoric about, he's a MAGA hat wearing, cop loving, more or less Nazi, with no evidence of such to go on. We have people calling him a mass shooter, a cold-blooded killer and murderer, when that's not necessarily the case here. And this all goes to, there's people who wanted to argue whether he had the right to be carrying a gun. What was he doing there? There's a lot of different things that you could say. For me, I don't know about you. All right, I only have an 11-month-old kid that's about to turn 1. All right, and I all I can tell you is that I don't see a scenario in which I would be telling my kid, you know what would be a good idea? You should go down to the area where they're doing, there's protests going on, but there's also a lot of riots and looting going on. I think you should go down there, take up arms with people, and, whatever happens, happens. That's a war zone. Do I think it was smart for him to be there? No, I don't think it was smart for him to be here. I don't think it was smart for him to be there because you saw the events that played out. I'm not faulting him. All right? And I'm not giving a pass to the people that were committing crimes. All right? Because whether you like it or not, breaking car windows, setting car dealerships on fire, setting buildings on fire, looting buildings, it's all unlawful. There's nothing that makes it a righteous cause. All right? I'm not going to defend that. I'm really not going to defend that. I'm not going to defend a 17-year-old going in that environment with a gun because this is exactly what I would expect to happen. I would expect there to be chaos, for gunshots to be going off all around, for people to be storming towards gunmen. This is all normal. That's all normal things that would happen, in this scenario. And if you have a gun and you're not a shooter, but you hear gunshots going off and then people storm up at you, you probably are going to panic. You probably are going to pull the trigger, whether you want to or not. That all boils down to then, how did Kyle feel? Did he feel that he was in imminent danger? There's videos here that would suggest that he was in imminent danger when he was not causing imminent danger. That's the way I see it. But as much as I can defend him in that, there's a difference between me defending him and hailing him as a hero, sainting him, anointing him. I don't like seeing that from the GOP, MAGA side, and even the Libertarian side. I don't like seeing this whole anointing of, Kyle Rittenhouse, the true American badass hero that went out and, I don't see that. And I also don't see people putting up the wanted posters and saying he's a cold-blooded killer who hates people, went there with the intent to murder, and was looking for trouble. I don't necessarily see that fitting this box either. And if you want to say, pick a side to me, I don't do that. I don't pick a side. I try to be as objective as I can. And the rhetoric and the vitriol and everything that's going on, playing into the divisiveness, we are getting to a peak point where more of this is going to happen. There was a shooting that happened in Portland because there was a big MAGA, rally that drove into Portland, and a guy ended up getting shot by another man, and that man was just shot by police today as they went to apprehend him. America, is this really what you want? Do you really want to be at each other's throats to the degree that you're just looking at everybody thinking like, is that person my friend, or is he my enemy? Is he somebody that I should reach out to, or is he somebody that I should cut off entirely? It's really bad. It's really bad. I denounce all of that because I don't want somebody looking at me just because of the way I look or just because of my politics and thinking that I'm their mortal enemy and that I'm unworthy of life, because I don't look at anybody like that. It's a tough situation, but this is the situation that we're in. Now, moving on from that, libertarians, I said I'm coming for you, and it's coming now. But I have to start with what Trump said about libertarians. I just have to real quick.
There was tremendous cheating in California. There was tremendous cheating in New York and other places. And if you take a look at the libertarian, they always talk about Jill Stein. Jill Stein took, 0.5%? They talk about Jill Stein. Well, I have a libertarian. I'm somewhat libertarian. I have to be honest with you. Rand Paul will tell you that. I have a libertarian candidate on last time that got, what, 4.5% or so. Those are all Republican voters. They're wasting their vote because they have to vote for us.
But this time, the popular vote would be a huge message to the country.
If there wasn't a libertarian on the ticket, I would win the popular vote. I would have won it last time.
Okay.
I love how you see I record these little videos on my iPhone. I'll go on YouTube or whatever. I'll record a clip that I want, and then I'll share it on the computer so I have it. I don't have to click into a web browser and show you. So, you caught my secrets. Damn, whatever. But Trump saying that he's I'm a libertarian. Ask Rand Paul. I'm a libertarian. No, just no. And as far as Gary Johnson taking all of the those are all Republican voters. No, they're not all Republican voters. Okay, they're really not. Granted, Gary Johnson and Bill Weld probably did attract a fair amount of Republican voters that just did not want to pull the lever for Trump. That's probably a fair criticism, but to say that they all are, and to say that he's facing a huge threat because of libertarians on the ticket right now, I don't. Maybe we're doing something right, but we're really not, because that's the next bit that I'm going into. We're really not doing anything right, because the Libertarian Party came under some flack for a tweet that was in a thread created by Conan O'Brien. Pull it up there. Look at that. Conan O'Brien. Bad news. The Libertarian Convention has been canceled due to participants' moms being unwilling to give them a ride. I don't know why he dropped this joke. I don't know where it came out of, because the Libertarian Convention's long been done. But this person replied, also, Rand Paul is afraid of somebody on the sidewalk might yell at him. Okay, well, it's a pretty bad joke, because Rand Paul's not a libertarian. He's a Republican. He's never been a part of the Libertarian Party. Don't know what to tell you. But the Libertarian Party chimed in and decided they would try to be funny and said, shh, you might spook him. And this caught the Libertarian Party a lot of flack, rightfully so. Number one, because, let's face it, Rand Paul was attacked by his own neighbor, and there's plenty of rhetoric online from the left about, everybody, deep down, everybody is Rand Paul's neighbor. God bless that man for beating the shit out of him. This is the divisive rhetoric that we're in now. It's lovely, isn't it? It sucks. It sucks. So Rand Paul was attacked by his neighbor, by the way, which was over like lawn clipping. It wasn't even over his politics. It was over his like lawn clippings, okay? I fight with the old heads next door just because they are passive-aggressive and they love nitpicking shit, okay? So I go through something like that with my neighbors, but I've never been assaulted by them, okay? And I would hope I would not be assaulted by them. But that being said, they're referencing a couple of nights after it was one of the, I think, of the last night of the Republican National Convention. Rand Paul exits with his wife. He has a police escort around him because there's angry protesters that flock around him, demanding, chanting at him, demanding that he say her name, referring to Breonna Taylor. I always screw up names, and I apologize for that. Breonna Taylor. So they flocked around him. People are like, oh, he's just getting yelled at. If you can't handle, if you're a statesman, if you're in politics, you can't handle people being mad at you, get out of politics, put on your big boy bands. Well, the only reason that he wasn't attacked, if you watch the videos, is because the cops were there holding bikes and keeping the crowd at bay. If they weren't, somebody undoubtedly would have rushed up and caused physical harm. At least you can draw a conclusion that it probably would have happened. It was also very, very stupid because Rand Paul introduced a little bill called the Justice for Breonna Taylor Act, in which he wrote legislation to end no-knock warrants in the United States. Oh, it's actual factual criminal justice change that you're out protesting for, but yet you don't know who is actually pushing forward the legislation in the Senate. Because if none of them knew Rand Paul. None of them knew that he pushed forward this legislation, that he sponsored this legislation. He wrote this bill. They didn't know that. All they knew was Republican bad, Republicans like cops, and they're not helping us, so fuck them. You become I'm sorry, that's a crowd of pawns on a chessboard. To me, they're useless. Just there's lots of them, and you can flock them around, and they'll do whatever the narrative says for them to do. But the Libertarian Party posts this. Ha 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 ha. They deleted this tweet because Justin Amash, one of my favorite politicians, said, I apologize to Rand Paul for this tweet coming from LP National. What happened to him was wrong. Rand has been my and our ally time and again. I am committed to building a libertarian party that unites millions of Americans and works with Rand and others to advance individual liberty. To be rebuked by your only sitting elected national official who wasn't elected as a libertarian, he decided to flip. That's telling for the Libertarian Party. And the Libertarian Party has, over the past couple of months, been full of social media blunders to the degree that lots of us libertarian-minded folk are talking about how we're kind of sick of the party. And it begs the question, is the party even really important in the grand scheme of things, which in some cases it's not. In a lot of cases it's not. You'll hear me. I've stated for this election cycle that I'm voting for Jo Jorgensen. I interviewed Jo Jorgensen. I interviewed Spike Cohen, her vice presidential candidate. Great interviews. If you haven't watched them, check out my YouTube page. They're there. They're two of my top highly rated episodes of Fritz Cast. Check them out. But that's the route that I'm still in. But there's lots of libertarians talking about, I can't support the party anymore. I can't get behind the party anymore because it's just way too hard of caving to, the protester side, but also the LP Twitter account, LP candidates, they've been kind of on the quiet side of condemning violence. They haven't been as vocal as they could be, as vocal as they should be. When we're the party of individual rights, when we're the party of limited government, when we're the party claiming to be the ones that'll bring this change to criminal justice that people want, we're the only, Jo Jorgensen and Spike Cohen, they're the only candidates outside of, the Green Party, Howie Hawkins and all that. I don't know what the Constitution Party's saying about any of this because you have to be really proactive to go out and find the even lesser third party and independent candidates' views on this stuff. But we'll say this. Jo Jorgensen is the only one that's going to be on all 50 state ballots that's actually offering dynamic criminal justice reform. Whether you like her as a candidate or not, whether you think she has absolutely no chance of winning or not, Donald Trump's not offering that. He's offering law and order, really big caps every time. Law and order. Only up until recently, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris weren't as vocal as decrying the violence and the rioting and the looting. Now they're backtracking and trying to get on top of that because there's been a lot of rhetoric up till now about how the unrest was going to happen and going to continue until they got what they want. So you got Trump saying law and order. You got Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris has many a criticism against her as an AG, and Joe Biden has more years in government than I've been alive on God's green earth, crafting modern day policy that a lot of what we're living is funneled through actions that Joe Biden took. And now he's going to be the one to fix it because because why? Because the progressives are behind him and saying, we'll give you our support in good faith, but you're going to cave to our demands. And whether or not that happens is just yet to be seen. All right? That's the long and the short of it right now. But the Libertarian Party, my God, talk about a party that up until now has been very lackluster on vision, direction, and impact. Because I'm not even going to credit the Libertarian Party for the some 4 million votes, 4% of the vote that Johnson and Weld got. I think I think that doesn't really go to their credit as much as it goes to being a Republican light ticket more than anything. But I digress. I've been rambling for an hour now. First live edition of Fritzcast. If you tuned in live, if you stayed with me for this time, I thank you. I appreciate it. And I'd like you to reach out either on my Twitter at FritzQS, Facebook.com/the Fritzcast, FritzcastPodcast@gmail.com, on YouTube, what have you, whatever you like to use. Reach out to me and let me know if you liked the live format, if you think I should stay away from the live format. I don't particularly care one way or the other. But if you enjoyed the show, like, subscribe, find me on these social media sites. We can interact, we can talk, and we can continue the conversation because, let's be honest, the conversation is not really happening right now. A lot of divisiveness, a lot of division, a lot of making enemies is happening, but we're not doing enough talking. We're not doing enough stepping back and trying to communicate each other's sides to each other, and I'm at fault for some of that too. But there's only one way to change it. There's only one good way to change it. There's a bad way to change it. I feel like, and unless we do something soon, we might be in too deep, and I don't want that. I don't think anybody should want that. And I could go on a tirade about that, but I'm not going to. So, thanks for listening for this week, guys. That's going to do it for Fritzcast today. I will be back next week. At this point, I don't think I'm having any guests. I think the soonest I'm going to have guests is about 3 weeks out. Might be sooner than that. But we're getting ready to do some guests. I've been contacted by Joe Jorgensen's campaign to actually interview a couple of libertarian hopefuls from around the nation that need some airtime. And I'd love to talk to them. I've got a couple of libertarian podcasters that have risen up in the scene over the past couple of months that I have on tap that are ready to come on the show. So there is things in the making. There's going to be some guests and some other fun things too, including looking at voting styles, and is there dynamic changes that we can make in the voting system in the United States. So all that's coming up in the coming weeks and months leading up to the election. There's going to be a lot of interesting subjects to tackle. So thanks for listening, guys. It's Fritz, and I'm out.